Babel. To'eba abominable. God hates religion. 1. Damuwth divisive image. The Babylonian effect. When Ezekiel is mentioned, the mind races to one of many places. For some, it is the incredible stories Ezekiel tells of seeing his Lord appear in Babylon. For others, it may be the fanciful depiction of the Valley of the Dry Bones. But for most, it is the apocalyptic Magog war. After all, even the rabbis disdain the detailed presentation of the monstrous millennial temple and replacement feasts at the conclusion of the book. And the 7 labors of Ezekiel at the beginning are too dumb for words. Unfortunately for those seeking divine guidance in these stories, Ezekiel was a false prophet. He is delusional, barely literate, and seldom credible. Worse, his Lord is a psychopath. Beginning with the grand illusions of the Lord riding in a chariot pulled by fearsome beasts modeled after the zodiac, this book is not suitable for young readers. This is the horrific portrait of a dark and demented spirit pretending to be God, one who desperately wants to be acknowledged as Yahowah, even though he is his opposite. If you are not yet an adult, either in years or in your growth in the covenant, you should not be reading this assessment of Ezekiel and his Lord. The wannabe God presented within its pages hates Jews and is committed to exterminating them. He is obsessed with his own aggrandizement and is desperate to be worshipped as if he were Yahowah. Anyone who is perceived to be standing in his way is either plagued, slashed, starved, burned, or boiled. Even those who attempt to escape are hunted down and murdered by this ruthless deity. And yet, as disgusting as Ezekiel is from beginning to end, Yahowah wants the truth to be known. His people have been tormented by the wrongful incorporation of the devil's tale into the Bible, into the Zohar and Kabbalah, into the New Testament and Christianity, where it is cited 38 times in Revelations alone, and into the Quran and Islam, where Gog becomes a cartoonish character. And so, therefore, Yahowah wants the book of Ezekiel exposed and condemned, from the erroneous details to the overriding themes. Yahowah's preference when confronting religious myths is to be disdainful and sarcastic, openly ridiculing the satanic mythology. I have done my best to comply. I have attempted to pose my cynicism similarly to how Eliah confronted the prophets of Baal and Asherah long ago. So, if you are uncomfortable mocking false prophets, false gods, and religious stupidity, you ought not read further. This is not my first journey into hell. I began by destroying the credibility of the Quran, Islam, Muhammad, and Allah and Prophet of Doom, rewritten and retitled Goddamn Religion. I wrote the 4 volumes of Questioning Paul, now presented as Twistianity, to liberate rational souls from the false claims presented throughout the Christian New Testament. And while it is a constant theme throughout Yada Yahowah, Judaism is thoroughly renounced in the 8th volume, as of separation. God hates religion, as do I. Ezekiel is not the only book which does not belong among the Torah, Nabi, Wa Mizmor. Others include Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Lamentations, large swaths of Daniel, and Haggai. Enoch is also invalid, as is Maccabees, along with the entire Christian New Testament, Talmud, Zohar, Quran, and Book of Mormon. However, this volume, as was the last, is devoted to undermining a single foe, one that has misled billions of people for over 2,000 years. The first chapter of Ezekiel opens with a wild depiction of a spiritual being aboard a celestial chariot, but from there we come down to earth, and the focus through the 24th chapter is on condemning and tormenting Jews. Then, through the conclusion of the 33rd chapter, we find a rebuke of Israel's neighbors, particularly the Lebanese city of Tyre and its king, albeit in an exceeding incredulous fashion. Thereafter, we are regaled with tales of the impending demise of Sidon, Egypt, Babylon, Assyria, Elam, and Meshektubal which, along with Edom, are shown vacationing in Sheol. This is naturally followed by the sight of a shepherd in Yisrael, caring for God's flock with showers of blessings cascading upon the people. Yisrael's renewal is seen in the vision of dry bones, another altogether discordant portrayal out of sync with other prophets. But that is the rub. One cannot compare Ezekiel with any other prophet save Daniel, who was actually a witness. Continuing through the text, Yehudah and Yisrael are reunited with Daud serving as king. And while true, this is somehow followed by the haunting predictions against Gog, his overthrow, and the burial of his hordes. Even though the Lord of Babylon promises that he will annihilate every Jew who doesn't like a happy ending. So, an oddly different Israel is re-restored along with detailed and elaborate plans for a gargantuan temple complex, inner and outer courts, gates, massive walls, and guard chambers. The wannabe God then arrives, but he's in a bad mood, still railing against Jews, the most courageous of whom he seeks to devour, literally eating their flesh and drinking their blood. There is a new agenda, including a meticulous presentation of offerings and meeting times, even of a Nazite elevated leader who is supposedly in charge of a fanciful Shabat / do-nothing day, new / no moon day, and ignorance day. Pesach is continued, but corrupted beyond recognition. Matzah is demoted from a micra to an ingredient. The other mode prescribed in the Torah are eliminated, most notably, Yom Kippurim, the Day of Reconciliations. The book concludes with an exceedingly odd redistribution of land to the 12 tribes. Only one problem. Much of what Ezekiel states contradicts the Torah in a myriad of ways, from the details to the most important themes. Okay, two problems. Yehudim are left homeless, Mount Moriah is flattened, and Jerusalem is buried beneath the hideous death camp the Lord of Babylon envisions as his shrine. I am not the first to study Ezekiel and recognize that there are serious problems with the text. Its dissimilarity to Moses' Torah, Daud's Mizmor, Haushah, Yashiyah, Yirmiyah, Zechariah, or Malachi is among the signs that we are sailing into uncharted waters. And we are going against the prevailing wisdom of the religious scholars who lavish praise on this despicable tome. The problems begin in the first chapter because the writer claims that he is in Babylon after the first captives were taken, but before the city was destroyed. And yet, he is shown doing the strangest things to garner the attention of Jerusalem's remaining residents, as if they could see or hear him 900 miles away. He was told to enact a bondage scene, then build a model of the city and besiege the clay rendering. He was told to lay on his left side for 390 days and on his right side for 40 days, shave his head, strike his beard with a sword, and throw his whiskers to the wind. His Lord commanded him to pack up his belongings every night and dig through an imaginary wall in mock exile, even to starve himself. He is pulled by a lock of his hair from Babylon to Jerusalem as his Lord dusts the city with burning coals. And that is not the worst of it. Jews are to be put into a pot and boiled alive. Even if we could get past all of these mercurial shenanigans, since just 7 years separated the two Babylonian sieges of Jerusalem, the book's prophetic warnings would have been obsolete before the ink dried. The Lord's inability to predict the future is underscored, not only in the many prophecies he gets wrong, but also in his admission that long-term prophecy is of no interest to him. With our initial journey into Babylon, detailed in the previous volume of Babel, fresh on our minds, it is with a healthy dose of skepticism that we proceed into the only other book which claims to have been written in the realm of confusion. During our review of Daniel, we endured a steady diet of truth and lies, often intermixed into an unappealing word salad. Fortunately, once we made our way into the second half of the book, we found old friends who were illuminating even in this dark realm. But they will not be here this time. As I did with the previous volume on Daniel, after having spent several weeks translating and commenting on Ezekiel, I have retreated to share this assessment in the opening chapter. I had tried to explain away the many errant statements found among some nuggets of truth, suggesting that the Babylonian effect was on full display. To be fair, knowing that we were still in Babylon, in my initial approach I did with Ezekiel what I had not done before, cherry-picking the most interesting statements from a sea of clutter. However, when I veered off of that course, the turbulence was undeniable, beginning early in the opening depiction of God aboard his chariot emblazoned with the faces of the Babylonian astrological constellations. Long before Ezekiel starts contradicting the Torah at the conclusion of the book, he shares an exceedingly bizarre portrayal of men considered so righteous that they were imbued with superpowers. Unfortunately, 2 of the 3 individuals were literary creations. So, as I analyzed the absurdity of the related claims in the 14th and 28th chapters of Ezekiel, I realized that I had to recalibrate my strategy because jumping in and out of lucid and uninspired statements was not only disorienting, it is contrary to Yahweh's Torah guidance. Therefore, other than coming to know the adversary's ambitions and plans better, it is unlikely that we will glean any inspiration from God in this review, other than what to avoid. That said, since the book of Ezekiel degrades women and dehumanizes Jews, by confronting its caustic rhetoric, we can liberate both from the pain it has inflicted. My mission is to systematically demonstrate why Ezekiel, like the first half of Daniel, should not be trusted, recognizing that it is one thing to make this claim but another to prove it. And in the process, I will explain how everything the Lord of Babel says and does serves to sketch out Satan's self-portrait and autobiography, leaving us with a copy of his playbook so that we might be better equipped to thwart his ambitions. Since Ezekiel fails miserably as a prophet, as did Daniel, although that was not his purpose, along with truncating Daniel and the demise of Second Babylonian book, we will witness the fall of Judaism and Christianity. Without the insane depictions of God in Ezekiel, there is no basis for the mysticism of the Zohar, and without it, Kabbalah is an orphan. And without Daniel, there is no Christ. Since Ezekiel fails the test of a prophet as laid out by Moses in Dabram Deuteronomy, there is no Gog, and there will be no Magog war. There are no published plans for a millennial temple. We can count on celebrating the Mikriwai of Matzah, Bikurim, Shabuah, Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah into perpetuity even though they were discarded by Ezekiel. The menu will remain consistent with the Torah, as will the land allocation to the 12 tribes. Jerusalem will be restored, not buried, and Moriah will stand tall. While Ezekiel describes the fall of Jerusalem, it was a current event and not prophetic. He also predicts the fall of Tyre, but every detail is invalid, and the surrounding text is so obviously false, one would be foolish to credit this to divine inspiration. The remaining prophecies describe highly improbable future events, so they cannot be used to validate the text. There is one theme, however, which rings true, at least if we avoid the spurious details. The first score of chapters denounces Judaism. But this is a lose-lose proposition for the religion because, if the book is genuine, Judaism is invalid, and if the book is a forgery, Kabbalah falls with it, as do the Haredim. Therefore, for those who have just set down the tumultuous first volume of Babel, Chaiwa Beast, and are now anticipating a less turbulent ride, buckle your seatbelts please, because we are still in Babylon. The challenges we faced when trying to explain why Daniel's account was often incongruent with Yahowah's testimony as it was conveyed through proven prophets are exacerbated in Ezekiel. This is not only because the book is much longer, but there does not appear to be an explanation for the divergent text. In Daniel, we were able to explain the stifling presence of politicized religiosity by recognizing that the first 6 chapters of the book exist to convey the unwelcome rise of Judaism and Christianity. However, in Ezekiel, truth and deception are intermixed. Moreover, Daniel does not directly contradict the Torah, while Ezekiel does so with reckless abandon. Further, Ezekiel claims to be a prophet while Daniel was content reporting what actual prophets revealed to him. This known, translating the second half of Daniel was worth the effort. No matter when the book was written or by whom, the prophecies provided by Dowd, who was called Gabriel, and the 2 witnesses, Eliah and another named Michael, are detailed, accurate, far-reaching, inspiring, and indispensable. And with numerous extant copies found in the caves above Qumran dating to the 2nd century BCE containing descriptions of events which would transpire immediately thereafter and through the close of time, we can be assured that those portions of the book were inspired by credible prophets. There is no other reasonable explanation. In the process of evaluating Daniel, we learned to do something we had never anticipated, and certainly had never attempted. We thoroughly analyzed what was reliable and learned from it while simultaneously explaining or discarding the incongruous. We ascribe this intermixing of truth and lies to the Babylon effect, whereby the unwary are easily confounded and confused. Admittedly, it was unnerving, and my first jittery steps through this quagmire were awkward. Questioning the veracity of someone who has been wrongly ascribed the status of prophet, and then ridiculing statements which are presented as scripture in every biblical rendition, is not for the faint of heart. It is easier to assume that every word of the Bible was inspired by God and is correct, but in reality, neither is true. And that is why Yahowah encouraged Moses to provide those who are guided by his Torah with a test we could use to determine when someone was speaking for themselves or for God. And now, we are afforded the opportunity to use it. Fortunately, having begun with Prophet of Doom, now presented as goddamn religion, and then later, writing questioning Paul, rewritten and retitled Twistianity, I was prepared to use evidence and reason to expose and condemn those things which were demonstrably wrong, regardless of how many people believe them to be true. Those who have read those books know that I was able to prove beyond any doubt that the Quran and Christian New Testament were unreliable, uninspired, inaccurate, and worthless, even counterproductive. And from God's perspective, this is necessary, because we cannot walk to Him until we first walk away from religion. We had another advantage, one that proved vital as we embarked on the augmentation of Twistianity and, more recently, with our bold assessment of Daniel. For 2 decades, I have translated and analyzed the Torah, Nabi, YYV2C1, and with 30 volumes to show for this effort, I know the truth, I know Yahowah, and I have come to understand his message. As was the case with Moses before me, I know when something is not right. I share this with you now as we are embarking upon our journey through Yechezkel Ezekiel because the Babylonian effect is on full display, and neither Dowd nor Eliah is here to hold our hand. Further, the speaker, as Adoni my Lord Yahowah, is assaulting God's good name, character, and intent, since misappropriating and sullying Yahowah's name is unacceptable. When Ezekiel writes YHWH, I will consistently remind readers, this is not him, #happyface#. We were forewarned. A century before the events twisted by Daniel and Ezekiel transpired and were committed to writing, Yahowah inspired Isaiah to reveal that Satan would rise out of Babylon to fulfill his destiny, which is to present himself as if he were God. It was all foretold in the 14th chapter of Yashia Isaiah, not long after introducing the Towrah and explaining how he would be inspired to compose this report for your edification. Afay. The devil's tale begins. It came to be, Wahaya, in the 30th year, Ba Shalash Shana, in the 4th, Ba Harabiawai, of the month, Laha Chodesh, during the 5th, Ba HaChamesh, that I was in the midst of, Waheni Ba talked, the exiles, Hagaula, by the Kaber waterway, Al-Nahar Kaber. The heavens were opened, Pada Ha-Shemaim, the sky parted. And I saw, Wa-Araya, an image of the gods which should be questioned, Mara Elohim, a questionable supernatural vision, the visual images of gods and patterns to be pondered of the deities. From Ma to question, pondering the implications of Araya, what is being shown. Yechezkel/Ezekiel 1 verse 1. As I share these words with you, I want you to realize that, while I'm using the bold type and italicizing the Hebrew basis for the text within parentheticals, as I have done throughout my translations of Yahweh's Torah, Nabi, YYV2C1, Ezekiel does not belong in that category. Therefore, I'm going to do a few things differently to underscore this reality. I am eliminating the quotation marks that I would normally use to set God's words apart from my analysis. More importantly, as previously stated, when we come to Yahowah's name, I will not write it out because it is being used fraudulently. Moreover, I will refrain from amplification to the extent possible because there is nothing additional to learn about God in this text, only about Satan and his ambitions. And also, I'm going to be as literal as possible with the translations because I do not want to add to the confusion or make it appear as if Ezekiel and his Lord were articulate. This known, in his introduction, Yechezkel Ezekiel was not clear. I do not think he intended to say he was 30 years old. And if this was intended to demark the time of his captivity, since he does not disclose which calendar he was using, even if he represents an actual historical character, this specificity is superfluous. Most Jews living 6th century BCE would have either been subjugated and oppressed by the Babylonians in Judea, or they would have been captive slaves in Babylon. Therefore, if using the Babylonian calendar, then this would have been 30 years after King Nabopolassar's coronation. The king was not only the founder of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, their accounting of time commenced with his ascension to the throne on what we would call November 22, 626 BCE. With this in mind, and by our reckoning, it would have been March 27, 596 BCE, which was Passover that year. And that is problematic because the image being portrayed is a religious depiction of God, something Chagmatzah would be fulfilled to resolve. This said, we should keep in mind that the Babylonians would eventually reset the religious new year to the first day of the 7th month, rather than the end of the 11th month when the king was coronated. Religious Jews still acknowledge this by beginning their high holy days with Rosh Hashanah. However, the surviving records of the Babylonian calendar reveal that it is in sync, right down to shared names of the months, with the rabbinical version used today. As we learned in the previous volume, Chiwa Beast, Babylon does strange things to a person's mind in coordinating calendars between the various systems. Babylon's, Rome's, the church's, and Yahowah's remains challenging even when sober. Therefore, while the previous accounting is straightforward and based upon the historic portrayals, making this the beginning of the second year of Jehoiakim's exile, the next statement says otherwise. And while determining the exact date isn't the goal of this enterprise, there is a discrepancy of several years. Regardless, by this time, Nabopolassar had been dead for about a decade. His son, Nebuchadnezzar, was now king. Since Babylon's initial siege of Jerusalem began in 597 BCE, should the other dates be accurate, this would have been the beginning of the second year of captivity for the 7,000 exiles, comprised of royalty, notables, eunuchs, craftsmen, smiths, and warriors. Although, the next line describes it as the 5th year of exile, placing the vision in 592 BCE, just 2 years prior to the second assault upon Jerusalem. Turning to the vision, not even the Tower of Babel could pierce the skies or open the heavens such that the spiritual realm could be seen from earth. It is 4 dimensions distant, beyond Euclidean space and time, past dark energy and dark matter. However, should the clouds have parted during that day, the entire Babylonian pantheon would be available for one's viewing pleasure. As astrologists, they charted them moving around the night sky. Standing where Daniel stood when he was frightened by the sight of Satan, we were told that the sky parted and the heavens were opened, Pada ha-Shemaim. And I saw, Wa-Araya, an image of the gods which should be questioned, Mar Elohim. If you have been led to believe that Ezekiel was whisked from Babylon to heaven, please think again. In actuality, while in Babylon, in the heart of the beast in which Satan would rise to inspire religious worship, the clouds parted to show the canopy of Elohim pagan deities. And that is why we should Maraya question what we are being shown. Throughout this revelation, we must never forget to examine the who, what, why, and where of Araya what is being revealed. We have turned the page, moving out of Daniel into Ezekiel without leaving Babylon, the place where institutionalized religion was integrated into the government, military, and caste system under Satan's orchestration to control the masses and to keep them from knowing Yah. There is an inexplicable change of voice between the first statement and the next two. Ezekiel goes from being a first-person narrator to speaking of himself in third person. It is either sloppy writing or the narrator is not who he purports to be. In the 5th of the month, Ba ha-Chamesh la ha-Chodesh, this, the 5th year, Hashanah ha-Shamishi, of the exile, la Galuth, of the deportation, of King, Hamelech, Yoyakin Jehoiakin, Yahau prepares, Yechezkel 1:2, the word, dabber, of this is not him, happy face came to dramatically and demonstrably exist, haya, it really happened. Cal infinitive cal perfect, to Yechezkel God strengthens, Yechezkel, empowered and prevail, growing strong with God, the son, bin, of Buzzy contempt, Buzzy, the priest, Ha-Kohen, in the land, Ba Eretz, of the Chaldeans/Babylonians, Kasdim, sages, astrologers, soothsayers, and Magians, by the Kaber waterway, Al-Nahar Kaber. It came to be that, Wahaya, the hand, Yad the influence, of this is not him, happy face was upon him, Al-Hu there, Sham. Yechezkel/Ezekiel 1 verse 3. It is time we ask ourselves who is telling this story and why is he pretending to be Yechezkel, a slave in Babylon? He knows and uses the name, Yahowah, but so does Satan, which means that he was likely demon-possessed. However, because he uses the name, and because he rants against the Jewish propensity to be religious and political, he is not a forerunner of the rabbis, nor religious. He disdains Jewish traditions and culture. He is also barely literate in Hebrew, but is sufficiently aware of the language for us to assume that he was likely Jewish, albeit a deeply disturbed and self-loathing one. And how is it that, like Daniel, he is unable to present an accurate accounting of his own brief history? This known, he must not be afforded any shelter. The crimes he has committed against Yahowah and Yehudim by writing this farce such that it would be included in the Bible are egregious and unforgivable. Examining the characters he has presented, it had been Jehoiakim's father, Jehoiakim, who had solicited the Egyptians to protect Yehudah Judea against the Babylonians, forgoing tribute to the latter. Jehoiakim was 18 years old when the spineless lad ascended to the throne of Yehudah. Just 3 months later, Nebuchadnezzar descended upon him and took him to Babylon as a slave. There would be no 5th year of his reign, and he was no more king of Judea at this point than a pomegranate. The Akkadian clay tablet known as the Babylonian Chronicle number 5 fills in the details. The 7th year of Nebuchadnezzar, in the month of Kislev, the king of Akkad mustered his army and marched to Hatu. He encamped against the city of Judah, and on the 2nd day of the month of Adar, he captured the city and seized the king. A king of his own choice he appointed in the city, and taking the vast tribute, he brought it into Babylon. Therefore, the date of Jehoiakim's surrender based upon the secular record would have been the 2nd of Adar I in Nebuchadnezzar's 7th regnal year, March 15, 597 BCE, Julian calendar. 5 years later, it would have been 592 BCE. And that is a serious problem for this story because it means that, rather than predicting the second siege of Jerusalem, it would have been occurring as the charades foretelling it played out. The admission that the writer was in Babylon is also problematic because his stated audience is in Jerusalem, 900 miles away. Nothing he says or does would have done them any good. No doubt you noticed, but rather than sully Yahowah's great name and reputation with this verbal diarrhea, I have omitted it, replacing Yahowah with "this is not him," #happyface hashtag. God had nothing to do with this book and wants you to be aware of that fact. As mentioned throughout the previous volume of Babel, Chiwa Beast, there is something truly sinister about Babylon which tends to cloud one's mind and alter their perspective. There are elements of this which are obviously invalid. I looked, I was shown, and behold, Wahina, a stormy spirit or gale force wind, Ruach Esaera, a tempest of the spirit or a destructive and raging swirling windstorm, came from Balmin, arrived out of the north, Saphoun, the hidden and treasured, a great cloud, Anan Gadol, tremendously obscuring phenomenon. Then fire, Wakhesh, so flames from combustion and burning, grasping hold, Lakach, taking hold, obtaining and receiving, of knowledge and brightness, Wanoga, radiant light and shining splendor, to surround it, Lahu Sabib, to encircle it. From its midst, Wa Min talk high, something similar to an Ka'ain, of the shining substance, Hachashmal, of the amber stone or glowing bronze, out of the middle, Min talk, from the midst, of the fire, Hayash. Yacheskel/Ezekiel 1 verse 4. The primary use of ruach is to convey spirit, but it can be translated as wind on occasion. However, in conjunction with this vision, spirit must take precedence over wind. And that is a problem since Esaera describes a tempest, which is raging, swirling, twisted, and destructive. The only ruach fitting that depiction would be Satan. Therefore, Babylon has brought us back to the rise of the adversary from his natural element. He is the twisted spirit of the north. Even in conveying his direction of travel, this is a perfect fit for the beast. Yahowah's ruach spirit would have arrived from above or from Jerusalem, due west of Babylon, not from the Saphoun north. And yet, it was the king of the north, Antiochus Epiphanes, whom we were offered as an exemplar of the Towerless One in Daniel 11. Further, Yahweh's fiery light offers up Noga knowledge and enlightenment, but it does not Lakach grasp hold of it and keep it. Moreover, while it is appropriate to afford insight to God, he does not have an eye in the midst of a fire. So now that we are back in Babylon, something is amiss. The reason that this depiction of God has never made sense to anyone is now becoming obvious. Called the all-seeing eye of providence in Christianity, it was the eye of Horus to the Egyptians. It is featured to this day on U.S. currency and the nation's Great Seal. This eye was also associated with Babylonian and Greek religious rites, where the mysteries of life and death were seen by those who were drugged as part of the ceremonies. And since this is being presented in Babylon, it is germane to know that the all-seeing eye was predominantly associated with the sky god, the moon god, Nana or Sin, and the sun gods, Enlil and Marduk. This is an inauspicious beginning. From the midst, Wa Min talk of her, Hayim A of it, was the likeness, Ka the similarity, of 4 animals, Arba, Chaya, 4 wild beasts or life forms. And this was their appearance to ponder the implications, Wa Ze Mara Hana. This was the questionable pattern and form, to ponder the implications of this phenomenon in Revelation, this spectacle pertaining to them. From to question Arya. What is being seen they were comparable to a man, Damuwth Adam Lahina. Their likeness, similitude, and resemblance was of an idolatrous person. From Dama, to resemble and be compared, even to devise and imagine that which is separating, divisive, and destructive, deadly and undoing and damn, blood. Yechezkel/Ezekiel 1 verse 5. Pagan gods were modeled after animals and people. Yahowah created animals and people. Yahowah is one, not four. So, while it is proper to compare Adam to Yahowah, in that God made him in his image, the religious do the opposite, constantly crafting gods who look and act like men and women. These animals are interpreted as the animating force of Kabbalah in the Zohar, a name which is derived from Ezekiel's celestial vision. In Christianity, the God not only is a man, the religion's primary symbol is that of a dead god on a stick. And in Islam, Muhammad is Allah. Further, since we remain in Babylon, it is important to note that the images they use to depict their gods show the faces of kings superimposed on beasts such as these, usually with wings and often with bull or goat legs. For each one, La Ekad was four-faced, Wa Araba Pana had four appearances and four wings, Wa Araba Kanaf, for each one, La Ekad, of them, Lahim. Yechezkel 1:6. Their legs, Wa Regel Him, straight feet, Regel Yasher, and the paw-like hooves of their feet, Wa Kaf Regel Him, were similar to Ka, the sole, Kaf, of a bull's foot, Regel Egel. And they sparkled and blossomed like gleaming flowers, Wa Natsats, they shined brightly and bloomed, like an eye, Ka, Ein, of a polished and burnished bronze snake, Nakasheth Kalel, of a smooth and glowing divining serpent. From Nachash, to practice divination and fortune-telling as a serpent or snake. Yechezkel/Ezekiel 1 verse 7. While I cannot imagine God having wings, Malach's spiritual messengers are depicted with them. And Satan is a Malach, not God. As for being two-faced or four, that is not the God I know. Although this is also fitting for the adversary. Pagan gods, especially those associated with either the Lord or the devil, were commonly crafted as bulls or given the legs of a goat, albeit these were clearly a step above the ordinary because they sparkled and blossomed like gleaming flowers. It was as if the Egyptian golden calf from the Apis cult was being reinterpreted as the brazen bull of the Greeks. And should you think that this is all in the past, check out the opening ceremonies of the 2022 Commonwealth Games. Associating the father of the gods with a bull began in Sumer, the predecessor of Babylon. The bull with the sun disk was of paramount importance to the pharaohs and their priests and was later incorporated into the mythology of Hadad, Zeus, and Jupiter. This foursome of beastly faces and animal legs is given yet another eye, this one like that of a burnished bronze snake and divining serpent. This is how Yahowah described Satan in the Garden of Eden. And his human hands, Yadhu Adam, from under their wings, Min Takhath Kanaf him, on their four quarters, Al Arba Reba him, of their appearances, Wapana him, with their wings, Wakanaf him, the four of them, La Arba him, Yechezkel 1:8, joined, Chabar, were fastened together, as a woman, Isha, to her sister, El Achouth High. Their wings, Kanaf him, did not go around, Lo Sabab did not surround, encircle or turn, in their travel, Ba Halak Hina, with their walking, with the individual, Isht person, walking, Halak, to a presence beyond the opposing side, El Eber Panahu, to an opposite appearance on the other side. Yechezkel/Ezekiel 1 verse 9. There is a lot more to Eber than I shared within the parenthetical. The same three letters, based upon the verbal root, Abar, speak of going beyond meddling and arrogance, crossing over to lead to the other side, angry and arrogant, interfering unjustifiably as a moral failure while passing by or crossing over. That is not the way Yahowah walks, but may be indicative of his people. I had expected better now that we have moved on from Daniel, but this is far worse. And yet, here once again there is a benefit because we are being reminded that the Lord of Babylon is Satan and that he wants to be seen as God. Even then, the human hands and wings on all four quarters, being joined like a woman to her sister, are exceedingly odd. Wings do not go around, and those with them need not walk. Further, we should not want to travel to the opposite side. The likeness, Damuwth, the divisive similarity in image, the deadly pattern and model, from Dama, to devise that which is bloody and separates, of their appearances, Pana him, their faces and presence, was of human presence and faces, Pana, Adam, the appearances, Wapana, the presence and faces, of a vicious lion, Arye, of a beast which plucks apart its prey, to the right, El Hayaman. For the four of them, La Arba him, the appearance, Wapana, the faces or presence, of a bull, Shor, from the left, Min Ha Samuel, of these four, La Arba Hina, and the face, Wapana, of an eagle, Nesher, unclean carrion bird of prey akin to a vulture, of the four of them, La Arba Hina. Yechezkel/Ezekiel 1 verse 10. I added a verb to the first sentence, while none was supplied by Ezekiel. I left the second as it was written. The bull is Satan's most enduring symbol. The eagle directs our attention to Rome, the most demonic of beasts. And all the while, this apparition remains four-faced. These four faces also represent the astrological signs of Taurus the bull, Leo the lion, Scorpio, whom the Babylonians drew as an eagle, and Aquarius as the man. They are symbolic of spring, summer, fall, and winter in the zodiac. And in this case, and since these beasts have been depicted by Satan in this manner, I will share their identity momentarily. But first, Let's pause a moment and rub our eyes. When we were confronted by the satanic symbolism in Daniel 10, which transpired in this same location, there were so many overtures to Paul's experience on the road to Damascus that we were able to make sense of it. Further, we had 9 chapters to prepare ourselves to recognize it, because Daniel was continually casting himself as an exemplar of Rabbinic Judaism and Roman Christianity. But this is right out of the gates of hell, and at the very beginning of the book of Ezekiel as well. So, had we not been introduced to Satan in Yashaya, and then in Daniel, this would have blown fuses. The picture of the fractured faces and separated wings continues. Their faces, Wapana him, their presence and appearance, and their wings, Wakanaf him, were separated and divided, pared, were parted and dispersed, spread out, from above, min lamal. For each individual man, la aish for each person, 2, shanaim, people, aish individuals, were joined together and touched, chabar, were fastened together, forming an alliance, and 2, washanaim, covered and hid, kaza, shrouded and clothed, their dead bodies, eth goyahina, that which is associated with their carcasses and corpses. Yachezkel/Ezekiel 1 verse 11. I have been working with Yahowah for years in the same capacity, as a witness, translating and contemplating, perceiving and sharing. It has all been productive and good, even though the time we spent exposing and condemning Muhammad, and then Paul was not nearly as enjoyable as when we were listening to Moses and Dowd. Yashia and Hausha are depressing relative to religion and uplifting pursuant to the relationship. So, I'm accustomed to the highs and lows of this mission. However, after spending 2 months in Babylon with Daniel, this is burdensome. Yahowah has but one face, and it is of my Father, warm and caring. He does not have wings, and he is one, neither separated nor divided. He is not a man, much less 4 of them. I cannot imagine what would possess Ezekiel to say that 2 men were joined together, as if representing Gemini, and that 2 were veiled as if Virgo. But this I know, Yahowah cannot die. He has no corpse. He is the source of life. Since Daniel used Goya, the carcass of a dead body, in conjunction with the terrifying vision of Satan that he envisioned in the same place, we are witnessing the same deadly Babylonian beast. To suggest otherwise would be an insult to Yah. Should the propensity of English translations be accurate in rendering Eber in the next statement as straightforward, this brings up another problem. One of the great advantages a 7-dimensional spiritual being like Yahowah has over us as 3-dimensional mortals stuck in the ether of gravity and time is that, while we are linear, he can move in ways we cannot even imagine. And so, while being linear is a restriction that Yahowah placed upon Satan, it does not apply to God. Moreover, since the inability to turn is being ascribed to this spirit, no matter how Eber is rendered, we are witnessing one of the most important limitations of the adversary. If he could go back in time, for example, or even forward, he would destroy humankind and free will. Even worse, should we translate Eber appropriately as opposite and opposing side, or as Abar to go beyond meddling and arrogance, crossing over to lead away, the problem grows exponentially for those who want to believe that this is a depiction of God. And the individual, Wa, Aish, the person or man, his presence walked, Pana hu Halak, his appearance traveled, to the opposite and opposing side, El Eber, to go beyond meddling and arrogance, crossing over to lead to the other side. From Abar, to be angry, displeased, and arrogant, interfering unjustifiably as a moral failure while passing by or crossing over. To whatever place exists, El Asher Hayasham, the spirit, Haruwak, would go, La Halak, would walk or travel. They walked, Halak, without turning, Lo Sabab, without pivoting. As they moved, Ba Halak Hina. Yachezkel/Ezekiel 1 verse 12. This depicts an individual walking away from the presence of this God. He, sometimes they, even she, is opposed to the vision being depicted because this individual is depicted as arrogant and immoral, unjustifiably meddling in human affairs. The Ruach Kodesh set-apart spirit can transcend space and time, moving without restriction. And yet, she does not wander around aimlessly, going to whatever place may exist. While further from the truth, there are aspects of Ezekiel's Babylonian vision which are quite similar to Daniel's sighting of Satan, although with far more equivocation. A divisive image, Damuwth, a deadly comparison, this bloody likeness as the similitude of a religious idol, from Dama, to be compared to that which is divisive and bloody by imagining that which is separating, destructive and deadly, of the animals, Hachaya, of the beasts, creatures and life forms. Their questionable appearance, Marahim, their pattern and form of inquiry into this sight and their spectacle. From to question Ara, what is being seen, comparable to Ka, combustible, destructive and deadly, Br, scorching, burning coals of fire, Gakalesh, charcoal embers ablaze, like Ka, similar to and associated with. An inquiry of the imagery, Mara, a questionable pattern, sight and vision. From Ma, to question, pondering the implications of Ara, what is being shown, of the torches of hers, Halapidim high, the burning sticks and firebrands of hers, moving independently and of their own accord between, Halak Bane. Going about and walking on her own recognizance and impulse, while positioned in proximity to, Hitpeel participle, not influenced by anyone or anything, albeit vividly walking. The beasts, Hachaya, the animals and living creatures. And bright light, Wa Noga, radiant gleaming, toward the fire, Lahash, approaching the flames, and out of the fire, Wa Min Haish, came forth, Yatsa, was brought out, as lightning, Barak, flashing bolts of lightning cast forth. Yachezkel/Ezekiel 1 verse 13. After being deluged with the comparative terms, Damuwth, Mara, and Ka, on 5 occasions in a single sentence, when we are finally given a verb, the torches of hers are walking independently and of their own accord between the beastly animals. That's clearly not good. And let's be clear, the proper definition of chaya is animal or beast. The ideas of a life form or living creature were concepts which were not integrated into the vocabulary of the day. Furthermore, the Lord of Babel will use chaya frequently to describe a monster he has deployed to prey upon humans, a beast with a craving for Jewish flesh. Also intriguing, Gackle is used symbolically by Dowd to address strife, in Mishal 26:21, shame, in Mishal 25:22, God's righteous indignation, in Mizmor 18:8-9, and then speaks of being condemned by God in Mizmor 120:4 and 140:10. That is not good either. We are reminded once again of the thunderous roar of these beasts. With lightning at the ready, as Marduk and Hadad, Zeus and Jupiter, they are prepared to zap those who step out of line. When we do as Mara and Damuwth suggest and question the image of this divisive and deadly beast which is being presented as if God, there are a limited number of ways to evaluate the chaya emerging from Babel. We can blame all of this on ergot, the psychedelic fungus prevalent along the banks of the river which, while later harvested to create LSD, was used extensively by the Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, and early Christians as a religious sacrament. While I don't much like my prophets stoned, the role that hallucinogens have played in every major religion cannot be ignored. Ezekiel is in Babylon where it was prevalent and would have numbed the pain of slavery. Some can take it at face value and believe that God is not only monstrous but similar to every other pagan god and goddess, whether animal, human, or both. This too is an impoverished and ignorant option. Or we can compare this vision to Daniel's, as we should, and recognize that this is Satan. Then the questions become, why is the devil being compared to God? Why is this twisted spirit coming from the north? Why 4 faces? Why are we shown the signs of the zodiac? Why a beast? And why are there so many references to eyes and lightning bolts? I suggest that Yahowah has already answered each of these questions to our satisfaction through Yashia Isaiah. If you recall, I began this review by establishing the parameters of this book's content. I shared that, following a wild depiction of a spiritual entity, the next 33 chapters of Ezekiel, 66.6% of the book, serve to condemn Jews so as to justify the Lord's commitment to exterminate them. With that in mind, shouldn't we expect the devil to express how he intended to use Babylonian paganism, the bull, Judaism, the lion, Christianity, the man, and Islam, as the scorpion, the 4 faces of this beast, to attack God's people? Satan's quest to be seen as God is understood when presented this way. The 2 books which claim to have been written in Babylon, Daniel and Ezekiel, tell the same story, as does Yashia's depiction of Satan emerging from this place in his attempt to rise above the Almighty. We are witnessing how Satan has used the Babylonian religion to inspire devotion. And the beasts, Wahachaya. So the animals, sped forth, Ratsa, made quick and darting, but exclusively linear, movements as if running ahead, then returned, Washub, like Ka, similar to and associated with, the questionable appearance, Mara, pondering pattern, sight, and vision. From A to question, pondering the implications of Araya, what is being shown, of lightning, Barak, of flashing bolts of fire cast forth. Yachezkel/Ezekiel 1 verse 14. There were many false gods with bolts of lightning, including the head of the Babylonian pantheon, Marduk. Hadad, as the chief deity of the Canaanites and Amorites, was also depicted wielding thunderbolts. These gods would be followed by Zeus in Greece and Jupiter in Rome. Yahowah, however, does not carry bolts of lightning in his quiver. The pagan gods who shaped Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all rode in chariots across the sky. So, and I looked, Wa-Araya, for the beasts, Hachayat, the animals, and behold, Wahina, a vehicular wheel, Ophan, 1, Ekad, in the earth, Beha Eretz, in the region and land, beside, Etzel near. The animals, Hachaya, the beasts, for the appearance of each of the 4, La Arba, Panahu, Yachezkel 1:15. The perplexing sight, Mara, the questionable appearance, pattern, and vision where we are encouraged to ponder the implications of what is being shown, of the vehicle wheels, Ha-Ophanim, and their construction, Wa say him, their workmanship and how they were crafted, was similar to, Kash could be assimilated with, that of an eye, Ein, the apparatus responsible for vision, of Tarshish, the ancient Punic. Thus Phoenician and Carthaginian, naval superpower with the first, reserve currency to control the trade and commerce, and the divisive image, Damuwth, the deadly comparison of this bloody likeness as the similitude of a religious idol. From Dama, to resemble and be compared to that which is divisive and bloody by imagining that which is separating, destructive, and deadly, as one, Ekad, of these 4, La Arba Hina. Their questionable appearance, marahim, the perplexing sight, and their fabrication, while ma'asehim, their workmanship, could be compared to ka-asher, the existence of haya, a wheel within the center of a wheel, ha-ofan ba ka-ofan. Yechezkel 1:16. Over their four quarters, al-arba riba hina, when going, ba halak, with moving. They themselves moved, him halak, without turning around, lo subab, without moving in a circular fashion, as they walked, ba halak hina. Yechezkel/Ezekiel 1:17. You were forewarned. The writing quality is remedial, and considering the source, it would be improper to improve it. What we are being shown is four beasts with one large wheel on earth beside the animals. The other wheels look like Tarshish, which is often used as a pseudonym for yesterday's Carthaginian Empire and today's United States. Within the wheels, there were wheels, none of which turned. While defeating the purpose, I suppose it kept the eyes from being spun around so that the beasts wouldn't become nauseous. I wonder how much ergot is required to see things this way. Or are we witnessing a severe case of schizophrenia? And their eyebrows, wagabhina, lofty and proud, wagoba, high and haughty, exalted and conceited. Were they, lahim, and fearsome, terrifying and awesome? Wayairah, they were, lahim. So, their eyebrows, wagabhim, were filled with eyes, male ein. All around, sabib, on all sides, of these four, la arba hina. Yechezkel/Ezekiel 1:18. Considering the fact that several billion people believe Ezekiel was a prophet, we have proof that it does not take much to fool almost everyone. All one has to do is wheel out one of these fearsome contraptions with eyes all around, and the people will bow down and worship it. God has promised that he will raise his children such that they grow and become more like him. This, however, seems like a demotion. Then when the beasts, Wabiye Hachaya, walked, Halak moved. They moved the wheels, Halak ha-ofan, beside them, Etzelhim. And when the animals, Wabiye Hachaya, were lifted up, Nasa, from upon the earth, Min, al-ha-eretz, they carried the wheels, Nasa, ha-ofan. Yechezkel/Ezekiel 1:19. Perhaps we have this all wrong. Rather than chariots filled with the gods racing across the sky, they are now decrepit and rolling along in their wheelchairs. I'm sure it happens to the best of them. If so, Babylon has become a nursing home for geriatric gods. It's Satan's retirement party featuring aging Olympians. And who said translating is difficult? Since I was not the architect and these are not my designs, it is important to accurately reflect the text and not embellish it. Therefore, this is a literal translation. Over which, al-asher, exists there, Hayasham, the movement, la halak, of the spirit, haruwak, to go wherever, halak sham, the spirit, haruwak, moves, la halak. Then the wheels, waha ofan, rise nasa, along with them, la umahim, because ky, the spirit, ruwak of the beast, hachaya, is in the wheels, bieha ofan. Yechezkel/Ezekiel 1:20. So, do I hear a motion to bring back Elia? And if we get him to return, since he is over 2,700 years old, do we need to provide one of these fancy wheelchairs? Surely, I jest. In walking, ba halak, they, him, themselves, go, halak. And in standing, wa ba amad, they, him, themselves, are propped up, amad. So, when raising them, wa ba nasa him, from upon the earth, min, al-ha eretz, they lifted up the wheels, nasa ha-ofan, along with them, la umahim. For indeed, ky, the spirit, ruach of the beast, hachaya, is in the wheels, ba ha-ofan. Yechezkel/Ezekiel 1:21. This religious spirit is trapped within the circle of the wheel because it represents the sun and moon as gods. The magic and secret powers of the circular form are liberally presented in the Zohar and are central to Kabbalah. The mystical founder of Hasidism is even venerated for having drawn a circle with his staff to defeat a demonic priest in a spiritual battle. Jews are famous for dancing in circles and even wandering about in circles for 7 days carrying the magical etrog during Sukkot. And of course, the kippah is round for a reason. Circles were thought to hold magic powers among ancient priests, and their spells and lore were incorporated into Judaism to shield brides, mothers giving birth, and the Torah from demons, and to justify the authority of the sages. Consider this from the Babylonian Talmud. Honi drew a circle in the dust, stood inside it, and informed G. D that he would not move until it rained. When it began to drizzle, Honi told G. D that he was not satisfied and expected more rain. It then began to pour. He explained that he wanted a calm rain, at which point the rain calmed to a normal rain. Tanit 23a, 4-10. Church is derived from the name of the goddess, Circe, which is pronounced similarly. She was the magic enchantress of Greek mythology, from whom the English words, circle and circus, were also derived. Jesus and the saints are all depicted wearing halos, which are sun discs. And as for Islam, the Quran speaks of chariots in the sky and of the sun and moon riding within them as they race across the sky. And of course, Muslims circumambulate the Kaaba. I'm not auditioning for devil's advocate, and I recognize that the position has already been filled, but wouldn't it have been more believable to say, the Lord is the God of every religion? He is flashy, moves fast, is fearsome and beastly, and he has eyes on you. I realize that these wheels do not turn, and that they have to be lifted up to move, but putting the spirit and eyes in them is pretty creepy. However, in fairness, Satan is a spiritual being with a split personality who strives to be lifted up, so Ezekiel got that part right. The divisive image, Damuwth, the deadly comparison of this bloody likeness as the similitude of a religious idol, from Damuwth, to resemble that which is derisive and bloody by imagining something destructive and deadly, over the heads, al-rowh, of the beasts, hachayah, the animals, is expansive, rakya, is atmospheric and spacious, similar to ka, eyes, ein, of ice, karak, frost, crystals of frozen water, awe-inspiring and terrifying, hayar, fearsome and frightening, stretched out, nada, spread out and extended, over their heads, al-rosh him, from above, min lamile. Yachezkel/Ezekiel 1 verse 22. Do icy eyes mean blue, cold, occluded, or cataracts? And is flying under such conditions dangerous? Irregardless, yes, I know it's not a sensible word since it would mean that you should not regard that which cannot be regarded, but it, nonetheless, seems appropriate. The description of the Babylonian beast with coals and ice, being inspiring and terrifying, with multiple personalities and eyes galore watching every move reminds me of the old line. I used to be a schizophrenic, but we are better now. I do not know how much more of this impoverished writing we can endure without starting to blather about like an idiot, but I suppose, since it worked for Ezekiel, doing so, we could also be venerated as prophets. And under, wadak hath, so what's located beneath, the expanse, harakya, the atmospheric space of their wings, kanaf him, straight, yasher, not crooked, either upright or on the level, each woman, isha, to her sister, elachouth high, to each man, la aish, two, shanaim, clothing and covering them, kaza lahina. Then with the two men, wala aish shanaim, under cover, the women hide and conceal, kaza, their corpses, lahina, ethgoya, their dead bodies. Yachezkel/Ezekiel 1 verse 23. Okay, I did not see that coming. So now I must ask, are these beasts transgender or hermaphrodites? Is this incestuous between the girls, and are the two gay guys going to come out of the closet? Is Satan a progressive, or just demonic with the necrophilia? With the switch from fearsome men, bulls, lions, and eagles to babes with wings and dead men in dresses, does the devil need a fancy acronym like LGBTQ with an added W for wings, a C for corpses, or perhaps N for necrophilia? Welcome to Ezekiel 1, now departing from Babylon. Climb aboard if you dare. By the way, it should go without saying, if this describes your God, then you may want to shop for another outside of Babylon. May I suggest looking in the Torah? There is a seldom used God cataloged therein, who is available for immediate acquisition. He's such a value. He more than pays for himself. And he comes tested, proven, and highly recommended. By the way, should you be offended at the translation of Goya as corpse, carcass, or dead body, you will be delighted to know that its root means behind, as in derriere. Apparently, everyone has one, including the Babylonian god. Birds' wings were designed such that they are quiet, but Satan wants everyone to know that he has arrived. So I heard, Wa Shama, the sound of their wings, Eth Kowal Kanaf him, like the sound of a sea of rabbis, Ka Kowal Mem Rab, similar to the noise of many waters, similar to the sound, Ka Kowal, of devastating demonic destruction and despoliation, Shadi, of the devil's havoc and ruin, of satanic violence and plunder. From any, I am, shed, demonic, shad, devastating and chaotic, and shadad, pillaging, assaulting, and utterly ruining. Wherever they went, ba halak him. It was the sound, cowl, of a large, confusing, and disorderly crowd, the din of pomp and ceremony, and the uproarious commotion and clamor of hordes of army troops, hamon, of the rumbling roar of an accumulation of expensive possessions, and of a multitude of wealthy individuals, the disquieting tumult of a growing and enraged throng. Yes, indeed, ky, like the sound, ka cowl, of the military, mashana, an army encampment of soldiers ready to lay siege, and a large human institution prepared for prostration. By standing, they ba a mad him. When present they, feminine plural, themselves, constantly choose to disable their wings such that they continually hang limp, Rafa kanaf him. The women want their wings to be feeble and falter, peel imperfect jussive third-person feminine plural. These females continually choose to have their wings suffer the effect of being disabled. Yachezkel/Ezekiel 1 verse 24. This may be the most overt affirmation that we are still in Babylon. Although that is a little like saying black is dark. We are witnessing Satan lording over the confusing amalgamation of religion and politics which would emerge from this confounding place to fool the unwary into worshiping and serving the Lord as a god. Let's begin by reinforcing the realization that Malakeh spiritual beings like Satan have wings, but Yahowah does not. Satan is so loud his voice can be heard in almost every human institution, while we must be quiet and listen to the Torah and prophets to hear Yahweh's voice. While Shadi is presented as the Almighty, in virtually every Bible translation, its roots are fiendish. The etymology speaks of Shadi, devastating demonic destruction and despoliation as a result of the devil's havoc and ruin. Shadi shouts, any, I am, shed, diabolical, shad, devastating and chaotic, shadad, pillaging, assaulting, and utterly ruinous. And it is the juxtaposition of almighty and demonic which enables Satan to be perceived as GD. Hammond describes the three rotten religions which would claim Abraham's heritage: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The devil's ambitions are accomplished by the things Hammond represents: the rumbling roar of an accumulation of expensive possessions, the commotion and clamor of hordes of army troops, and the din of religious and political pomp and ceremony, even of a multitude of wealthy individuals, and the disquieting tumult of a growing and enraged throng of people. Satan needs to be popular, while Yahowah is set apart and uncommon. The adversary's religions are comprised of many compared to a relationship with one. Satan shouts, while Yahowah wants us to be quiet and listen. It is an army of armed men compared to most shepherding God's flock. Satan is chaotic, while Yahowah is consistent. There are many paths to the Lord of religion like spokes on a wheel, but there is but one way to Yahowah, and it is linear, not circular. The four beasts comprising this picture of Satan are portrayed as fatigued females prone to standing around, doing nothing, ostensibly to give their feeble and faltering wings a rest. We can only assume that the constant drumbeat of war that has plagued the planet is wearisome, even for demons. This frightening image seeking to be seen as God is so pretentious and demonic in this setting. Why has no one spoken of it previously? In search of that answer, I turn to Chabad.org, which is the international voice of the most popular strain of Judaism. When we read what they wrote pursuant to this image in Ezekiel 1, we find that Jews have done what Yahowah was predicting. The Haftorah, final reading from the prophets, for the first day of Shavuot, the fourth Mikra, when the Torah was revealed, is of the most hallowed portions of the Bible. Known as Merkavet Yechezkel, the chariot of Ezekiel, the reading speaks of the revelation to Ezekiel in which he saw the entire gamut of divine beings in what he describes as a chariot. This text is actually the primary source in the Tanakh for the mystical element of Torah, known in the Jewish vernacular as Kabbalah. In fact, the Talmud and early Jewish works refer to Kabbalah as Maseh Merkava, the workings of the chariot. The narrative in Ezekiel speaks in physical terms about a completely spiritual reality. It is impossible to interpret any part of this description in a literal way, as it is only an allegory for metaphysical concepts. In fact, according to Avodat HaKodesh service of the Kabbalah sanctuary, this is exactly what transpired in Ezekiel's vision. He was shown images of the physical, while understanding the Gedali ideas to which they corresponded. This style is replicated in most Kabbalistic works, where much of the teachings are also taught via physical metaphor. The sages throughout the ages warned that the student of Kabbalah must divest the words from their physicality and be knowledgeable enough to do so. In recent times, one of the great achievements of Chabad Hasidic/ultra-Orthodox teachings was to do just that. All the key and foundational aspects of Kabbalah are dissected and thoroughly explained in such a way that the human mind can grasp at least the concept of a certain spiritual idea. Many of the phrases in this Haftorah are explained in Chabad Hasadat, the Ukrainian Hasidic cult of Judaism, which is attributed to the rabbinic mystic Baal Shem Tov, Lord of the Good Name, in the 18th century, called ultra-Orthodox when it is nothing of the sort at great length. The rest of the article blends mysticism and Gnosticism into a dizzying soup of religiosity. Chabad, Hasidic Judaism, and the rabbis in black mourning suits comprise a metastasizing cancer which is consuming the lives of the Jewish people. https://www.chabad.org/library/article_cdo/aid/4036882/Jewish/the-vision-of-Ezekiel. HTM. Funny thing, Moses spent 40 years alongside Yahowah, and he never once described him in this manner. Dowd knew Yahowah better than anyone and said nothing of this sort about him. Abraham's description of Yahowah during their meetings bears no resemblance to this spectacle. Yahshua met with Yahowah in heaven, and yet, he did not describe it this way. The seraphim were shown to have wings, and one even carries a piece of coal, but these things are not attributed to God. The only analog to this portrait with satanic overtures was witnessed in the same place by Daniel. And now you know why. Although, we are left to ponder whether this is the reason Santa Claus snubs bad boys and girls by leaving them a lump of coal. To be fair, the Christian interpretation of this satanic beast may actually be worse. The four faces of the zodiac are attributed to the gospel writers as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Many claim that this monster is a portrait of the mythical misnomer, Jesus Christ. Continuing to describe the god of religion and the beast of Babylon, the monster speaks but says nothing. And there was a voice, Wahaya Cowl, from above, Min Al, the expanse over their heads, La Harakya, Asher, Al-Rosh him, approaching the firmament of the atmospheric space, beneficially over the top of them. By standing and being present, they, ba mad him, themselves, constantly chose to disable their wings such that they would continually hang limp, Rafa Kanaf him. These women want their wings to be feeble and falter, peel imperfect jussive third-person feminine plural. The females continually choose to have their wings suffer the effect of being disabled. Ezekiel 1 verse 25. This reminds me of the scene from the movie Devil's Advocate, in which Al Pacino's character speaks of God being an absentee landlord, worship that never, representing Satan. He says, I'm here on the ground with my nose in it since the whole thing began. I have nurtured every sensation man has been inspired to have. I've never rejected him because I never judged him. I'm a fan of man. I'm a humanist. Who could possibly deny that the 20th century was entirely mine? All of it mine. I'm peaking. It is my time now. Satan wants credit for constantly working against humankind. His wings are weary after hovering over the development of the Babel and Babylonian that would evolve into Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And then there was the constant stream of war and the perpetual fountain of lies, resulting in the agonizing oppression of God's people. It has been a long haul, and the devil needs his rest before the grand finale. One can only imagine how fatiguing, indeed annoying and exasperating, it must have been acting as the Baal Lord responsible for giving Hasidic Judaism a Shem Taub good name. Like Pacino in the starring role, it has been one of the greatest acting performances of all time. I believe I may have seen what could have been revealed, and that it might have been similar to the likeness of something comparable to, from even higher above, Wa Min Mile, the expanse which is over their heads, La Harakya, Asher al-Rosh him, like a questionable vision, Kamara, comparable to the pattern of inquiry of the who, what, where, and when associated with the appearance of the puzzling phenomenon. From to question Arya, what is being seen? A sapphire stone, Ebon Sapphire. The bloody likeness and divisive similarity, Damuwth, the representative image, a similitude as a religious idol. From Dama, A2, resemble that which is imagined and divisive, separating, deadly, and destructive, of a throne, Kais. And over the discordant image, Wa el Damuwth, so above the deadly representation of this bloody likeness as the similitude of a religious idol. From Dama, to resemble and be compared to that which is derisive and bloody, imagined such that it is separating, destructive, and deadly, the seat of royal dignity and authority, Hakai's, the elevated throne. The divisive image, Wa Damuwth, the fatal comparison of this likeness of a bloody and destructive religious idol, like Ka, similar to and comparable with, the dubious vision, Mara, questioning the pattern of inquiry, pondering the who, what, where, and when associated with the appearance of the puzzling phenomenon of Adam/man, Adam, humankind, upon it, al-high, out of the heights above, min la mile. Ezekiel 1 verse 26. Lots of dazzle without substance. It is a metaphor for religion. And in the end, Adam is sitting on the throne. Satan must have been right. Eating from the forbidden tree made him like God. Now, if only he had offered Satan a bite. And now for the good news, we are nearing the end of Ezekiel's nightmarish vision. So I saw, Wa Araya, as if it were, Ka, something similar to, an eye, ein, of glowing brass, chashmal, of a shining substance such as glowing bronze, like a questionable vision, Kamara, similar to the pattern of inquiry regarding the who, what, where, and when associated with the appearance, this puzzling phenomenon and spectacle, from to question what is being seen, of a house of fire, Eshbath, of a family ablaze and burning, a home consumed by fire, approaching it from every side, Lahai Sabib, surrounding and encircling it. Out of Min, an inquiry of the imagery, Mara a questionable pattern, sight and vision, his waist, Matname who his slender back, body, rear, girdle or loins, and above, Wala mile, including from Wa Min. The perplexing sight, Mara, was the questionable appearance, pattern, and vision where we are encouraged to ponder the implications of what is being shown, of his slender back, his rear or loins, Matname who is thin waist, and then downward, Wala mata. So regarding what is below and beneath, I saw as if it were, Kagai that which is similar and comparable to, a curious image, Mara, at the questionable sight, of fire, ash of flames, and the bright light, Wa Noga, the majestic radiance, regarding him was circular and encircling, Lahu Sabib. Ezekiel 1 verse 27. The idea of Satan burning the house of God, setting his family ablaze, with flames surrounding his home and children afire is truly demonic. But it serves as a fitting conclusion to Satan's embellished portrait. No mouth but, yet another eye. So, I was curious and found that the dragonfly has the most, with 28,000 lenses per compound visual organ. Spiders have 8 eyes and some marine mollusks, such as the fuzzy chitin, while lacking a brain, have hundreds. The deadly box jellyfish is also brainless but touts 24 eyes of 4 different kinds. So, the religious god is in fine visual company. The concluding comment is perplexing indeed. Was the beast of Babylon's but on fire, or were his loins burning? Why was his slender waist and backside ablaze, rather than his countenance? Why did the flames encircle him as they were seen as doing to the family home? Is this a picture of the destructive demon circumambulating the covenant and home of God in an effort to incinerate both? This brings us to the concluding line of the first chapter of the book of Ezekiel. Like the questionable vision, Kamara, similar to the pattern of this form of inquiry visualizing the who, what, where, and when associated with the appearance of this puzzling phenomenon and spectacle, from to question Arya, what is being seen, of the rainbow, Hakashe, a bow which flings arrows, which, Asher, exists in the cloud, Haya Ba Anan, in the day of the rain, Ba Yam Geshem. Thus likewise and correct, kin, so truthful and right, was the perplexing sight. Mara was the questionable appearance, pattern, and vision where we are encouraged to ponder the implications of what is being shown, of the knowledge, radiance, and splendor, Ha-Noga, the bright light and majesty, all around him, Sabib who surrounding and encircling him. The sight which should be questioned, Mara, the intriguing pattern and form, the puzzling appearance and vision, the phenomenon and revelation, of the bloody likeness and divisive similarity, Damuwth, of a comparative image, this similitude of a religious idol, from Dama, to resemble that which is imagined and divisive, separating and destructive, deadly and bloody, of the significance and glory, Kabao to the honor and respect, the attribution of status and manifestation of power, of this is not him. Hashtag happy face hashtag. And when I was looking, wa ariati as I was seeing, Kalam perfect, I fell, wa naphal. I prostrated myself to the tyrant feigning death, ready to be cast down, upon my face, alpana ini. I heard, wa shama, the voice of one speaking, Kal Dabber. Yachezkel/Ezekiel 1 verse 28. Just as the rainbow has been usurped by the LGBTQIA+ community of queers who are questioning and intersex invertebrates who strive to be more than asexual androids, the sign of the covenant is often misappropriated. So is Yahowah's name. There are a number of religious charlatans around the world who immorally and illegally use these translations and transliterations to establish lucrative religious cults. Be wary of them. At least, Yechezkel got one thing right. He planted his face in the muck of the river. He should have been embarrassed. From Baal to the Bible and the Babylonian Talmud, nothing good comes from the devil's dominion.